I was dragged into the world of music as a reluctant 10-year-old. One summer evening, while my friends went off to swim at the Willingdon Club, my mother packed me into a car and said we were going to meet a music teacher. The music teacher lived in an old building under Kennedy Bridge, 10 minutes away from the tree-lined streets of Kambala Hill where we lived. Kennedy Bridge was a neighborhood known better for prostitutes and gentlemen's clubs, but not for musicians. The only other time I had heard of Kennedy Bridge was when my parents joked about the adventurous evening in a Mujra dance parlor many years ago. They recalled the night vividly, the pimp with the red kerchief around his neck who negotiated with them on the curbside under the bridge, the walk up to room number 88 on the second floor of a building which smelled of urine, the green windows which shielded its inhabitants from any prying eyes on the bridge that heaved with traffic just a few feet away, and a woman called Chandni, draped in a sequined nylon sari, who gyrated under 4 chandeliers and leaned forward so far under my father's nose that he bursts into giggles every time he describes the moment. But, like in most neighborhoods in Bombay, daylight masked what went on after hours. During the day, the area under Kennedy Bridge was like any other crowded street, throbbing with people hawking their wares or hurrying along. Across the street from the whorehouses stood an old stone convent called Queen Mary's School. Next to it was a row of auto part stores. And at the end of the road, deep inside a residential colony called Congress House, lived a great musician. It was 5 in the evening when my mother and I got there. We parked along the curb and walked past the storefronts, displaying lubes and spanners to get to the grey, disconsolate building. There was no lift, so we trudged up the stairs to a tiny apartment on the 3rd floor. A family of 3 lived on one side of the kitchen. The music teacher lived on the other side as a paying guest in a room with pale pistachio-colored walls. Her solitary companion in this room was her mother, whom she called Ai. As I learnt later, the room was a semblance of another home, her ancestral bungalow in Kolhapur, the town she had left behind, where temple chimes wafted in with the evening breeze and jasmine grew in abundance. This is the kind of compromise Bombay forces on those who come to her, the price they must pay for her pleasures. I grew up in 2 very different Bombays. One was the Bombay of the immigrant businessman, the Banya, who my family comes from Punjab, and they set up mills here, stainless steel mills, and became very successful. And they were really ruled by a singular purpose, which was to make money. The other Bombay that I grew up in was the one that I just described. And it was equally cocooned in its own way and driven entirely by a very purist pursuit of music. So when I sit down to write, the two sort of merge in my imagination to create a very intricate and sort of paradoxical tapestry of memory and emotion. And over the years, I've learned not to really sort of fight the two, and really live with my cultural schizophrenia. Because in many ways, this is what Bombay is. I mean, I'm not faking it. This is me. This is what happened, and they are very two divergent worlds. And yet, they all form a part of something that means a lot to me and to the city. And I guess the reason I chose this Kabir Bhajan is because, apart from the fact that it was sung at a very important time in the history of Bombay, the meaning of the words is that everything, the seven seas and the trickling Nala, everything lies in a moment. And that is what Bhagwan is. It's that moment. And I think for me, Bombay has been a series of very special moments. And the one I really want to sort of describe is what happened just yesterday when I re-entered the music room in a way, 30 years later, when I took my 9-year-old son back into the streets of Girgaon. And in the midst of the kind of chaos of Bombay's hideosity and madness and traffic, I re-entered this small room where we did a Ganda Bandhan with Padhye Master, who's a Tabalchi who used to accompany, or still accompanies, my music teacher. And 30 years later, we were back in that space with this reluctant, scowling little boy, which is what I had been, and me, the sort of persistent mother, trying to recreate a Bombay for him and a world for him that he would hopefully cherish for the rest of his life. And I found it. I found it in the midst of, everything. It was going back in time and place. We went into this little place called Bhagini Samaj in Girgaon, which has an impossible address because it says, some lane which has been renamed 3 times over, vagera, vagera. And so we sort of walk in there, and then there was Padhye Master, this really wonderful, simple musician who lives in Borivali and commutes to Girgaon to teach these few students 3 times a week. And he was there lighting the agarbatti and doing the little puja in front of the deity and then sitting down and very simply and beautifully teaching my son the tabla. And to me, really, this moment is what made up for all the madness of Bombay that we survive every day. And it exists actually all around us. It really is something that we have to seek out and sometimes rely on nostalgia and memory, and sometimes find in these extraordinary times, in these extraordinary spaces. But they are there. I genuinely believe it, And so every time we sort of hark back for the good old days that never were, I think we have to just learn to recreate them. Sometimes through fiction, sometimes through music, and sometimes just by wandering with a very open mind into parts of Bombay that we didn't even know existed. So that's my take on Bombay.
Bit of a difference between this and Aftertaste, which was different Bombays completely.
Well, yeah, I could end by reading a little short extract from Aftertaste, which is so it's about a business family in the 50s and 60s and 70s, which starts a mithai business in Kalba Devi, which really was the sort of central business district of Bombay back then, and was quite remarkable in its enterprise. So this bit describes Kalba Devi a little bit and these families that came to live there. Kalba Devi was the central business district of Bombay. It grew around a temple complex dedicated to the presiding goddess of the city. It was essentially a long, busy street which went from the Christian neighborhood of Dhobi Talao to the Muslim area of Baidhoni, with numerous Hindu and Jain temples dotting the way, so that businessmen could pop in and out and ask for better prospects. Most of the business was conducted on gaddis, thick mattresses where the proprietor would sit upright every time a customer walked in. The rest of the time, he lolled around, daydreaming about future earnings, or about Nargis in her latest movie, or about that tasty mithai available down the road. This is where Bimmo Di Barfi found its happy corner. Bimmo Di Barfi being the mithai shop started by the family in my book, named after Bimla, who's the mother. Every time one of these businessmen wanted to celebrate a small victory, a good deal struck, or a customer cuckolded, he would run to Bimmo Di Barfi. Here, he would reward himself with a sweet or savory delicacy. If it was the 11s, he would ask for hot jalebi, followed by crisp papda with slices of raw papaya and tea. At lunchtime, they would ask for pithi puris and drippy rasse wale aloo. The 4 o'clock bangs would be serviced by kachori and tea. And when hunger hit these businessmen at 7 in the evening, just after shutting shop, you could count on the array of fresh barfis and mithai that lay under the glass. It was meant for those who had had a good day, as well as those who were making up for not having had a good day. It was just nice that it was there. These families belonged to the trader community, the Banyas, known for their formidable business acumen, where the boys were taught their multiplication tables in quarters. At some point, they may or may not have come from Marwar in Rajasthan, but over the years they had dispersed all over the country, following the smell of money. The Todarmals, the family in this book, had long adopted the language, food and dress of their adopted home in Punjab, yet their identity was Banya first, and they continued to intermarry within this diasporic business community. One of Daddy Ji's favorite jokes was about a Marwari who was visiting his old college friend, the Sheikh of Dera Arabia. After a heavy evening of food and drink, the Sheikh suddenly complained of severe heartburn and was rushed in his car to the hospital. He needed blood, and the Marwari offered his. The Sheikh got well and rewarded his friend with a new Rolls Royce. The Marwari said it was not necessary, etc., but accepted the gift. About a year later, the Marwari was visiting his friend, and again, after a heavy evening, the Sheikh had to be rushed to the hospital. Marwari blood was transfused again. When the Sheikh recovered, he sent his friend a box of chocolates with a note saying, "Most grateful for your timely help. Can't offer more than chocolates as I now have Marwari blood in me." And that is Bombay for you.